Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Michael Carter's fingers traced the smooth silk of his tie, a rhythmic motion that did little to calm his nerves. The master bathroom's harsh lighting caught every line on his face, each one earned through years of silent endurance. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who'd built his success from nothing. Regional director at Morton & Associates, father to a brilliant daughter, owner of this sprawling mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Yet standing here, preparing for another one of his wife's extravagant parties, he felt like nothing more than a prop in Vanessa's carefully curated life. "Mr. Carter?" Maria's soft voice accompanied a gentle knock. "Mrs. Carter is asking for you." Michael caught the slight tremor in his housekeeper's voice. Maria had worked for them for 5 years, her quiet efficiency and loyalty a cornerstone of their household. But lately, Vanessa's treatment of her had grown increasingly cruel. "Thank you, Maria. Tell her I'll be right down." He heard Maria's footsteps retreat, then pause. "Mr. Carter?" Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "The florist?" Mrs. Carter reduced her to tears earlier, over the shade of pink in the roses. Michael's jaw tightened. He turned from the mirror, meeting Maria's concerned gaze. "I'll handle it. And Maria? Give Mrs. Chun from the flower shop an extra 1,000 when you pay her." "For the inconvenience?" Maria nodded, relief flooding her features. This was their routine now. Vanessa would wound, and Michael would quietly heal. Paying for peace with both money and dignity, the Rolex on his dresser gleamed accusingly, Vanessa's Christmas gift to him. Bought with his own money, of course. She presented it at dinner, cooing about how she couldn't bear to see him wearing that shabby old thing anymore, referring to his father's vintage Omega. The same watch his father had worn while working 2 jobs to put Michael through college. The same watch that had been on his wrist when he'd signed his first $1 million deal, his fingers closed around the Omega's worn leather strap. For a moment, he considered wearing it instead, one small act of defiance. But the thought of Vanessa's public humiliation, her cutting remarks about his sentimental weakness, made him reach for the Rolex instead. "Dad!" Emily's voice drew his attention to the doorway. His 17-year-old daughter stood there, a vision in midnight blue, her dark eyes so like his own, filled with understanding beyond her years. "Need help with that tie?" Michael smiled, the first genuine expression to cross his face all evening. "When did you get so grown up, sweetheart?" Emily crossed the room, her movements carrying the same quiet grace that had marked her childhood. She'd always been different from her mother, thoughtful, where Vanessa was impulsive, kind where Vanessa was cruel. Sometimes Michael wondered if she'd absorbed all the goodness in their family, leaving none for her mother. "The caterers are hiding in the kitchen," Emily reported as she adjusted his tie. "Mom's on her 3rd meltdown about the champagne. Apparently, the 2008 Dom Perignon isn't good enough anymore." Michael sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "That champagne costs $500 a bottle." "It's not about the champagne." Emily's fingers stilled on his tie. "She's been like this all week, ever since she came back from her shopping trip downtown." Something in Emily's tone made Michael look at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Before Emily could answer, Vanessa's voice shattered the moment. "Michael, get down here now. These incompetent fools are ruining everything." Emily squeezed his arm. "Go. I'll run interference with the staff." Michael watched his daughter slip away, her quiet strength a reminder of everything good in his life. He squared his shoulders, adjusted his cuffs, and prepared to face another evening of Vanessa's carefully orchestrated chaos. The scene downstairs was exactly what he'd expected. Vanessa stood in the center of their marble foyer, a vision in blood-red Valentino that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Her perfectly manicured hand gestured wildly at the catering manager while the other clutched her newest prize, the $100,000 diamond necklace he'd bought her last month. The purchase had been a desperate attempt to smooth over another of her inexplicable rages, this one triggered by a suggestion that they spend their anniversary at the same small Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. "Absolute idiots," Vanessa was saying, her voice carrying that particular pitch that meant someone would be crying soon. I specifically ordered the 2008 vintage. This might as well be grape juice. The catering manager, a distinguished man in his 50s who'd handled events for half the city's elite, seemed to shrink under her assault. Mrs. Carter, I assure you, the 2008 Dom Perignon is. Did I ask for your opinion? Vanessa cut him off. God, where did they find you? Some cut-rate service? Michael! She spotted him on the stairs. Finally, tell these people they're ruining everything. Michael descended the last few steps, each one feeling heavier than the last. Vanessa, sweetheart, the 2008 is an excellent vintage. Our guests won't know the difference. She whirled on him, green eyes flashing with familiar contempt. Won't know the difference? This is exactly why I have to manage everything. You'd probably serve boxed wine if I let you. Her hand flew to the diamond necklace, adjusting it unnecessarily. Sometimes I wonder if you've learned anything about class despite all these years with me. The catering manager tried to slip away, but Vanessa's voice cracked like a whip. Where do you think you're going? Replace it. All of it. Now. Michael watched the man hurry away, adding another mental note to his growing list of people he'd need to apologize to later. The list had grown longer each year of their marriage. Like rings on a tree marking seasons of discontent, Emily appeared silently at his side, her presence a balm. Mom, the first guests are pulling up. Like a switch being flipped, Vanessa's fury transformed into radiant charm. She touched the diamond necklace, ensuring it sat perfectly against her collarbone, each facet catching the light like frozen tears. Michael, darling, go greet the Andersons. And try to sound intelligent for once. As Michael moved to the door, he caught a glimpse of their reflection in the grand mirror husband, wife, and daughter, the perfect family portrait. But like everything else in their lives, it was just another carefully constructed lie, as fragile as the crystal champagne flutes waiting to be filled with the wrong vintage. And somewhere in the city, in a small pawn shop on 5th Street, another piece of their perfect lie was already beginning to unravel. The Anderson family swept through the front door in a wave of designer perfume and forced laughter. James Anderson, recently divorced and worth north of $50 million, led the group with his arm around his college-age daughter. Michael noted how Vanessa's eyes locked onto him like a heat-seeking missile, her smile sharpening at the edges. James, darling. Vanessa glided forward, the diamond necklace catching the light with each deliberate movement. And Rebecca, you're more gorgeous every time I see you. Those college boys must be falling all over themselves. Michael watched his wife work, admiring her technique despite himself. She had a way of making each person feel like the only one in the room, a skill that had once charmed him too, before he realized it was all performance. Her hand touched James's arm. Lingering just a moment too long to be casual, the party swelled around them, filling their home with the particular buzz of wealthy people pretending to enjoy each other's company. The mayor and his wife, 3 state senators, half the city's top lawyers, and enough CEOs to form a Fortune 500 company. Vanessa had always known how to draw power into her orbit. Mr. Carter, a young server approached, anxiety written across his face. Mrs. Carter asked for the '08 champagne, but we've checked every case and served the 2010. Michael interrupted quietly. If anyone asks, tell them it's the 2008. Trust me, no one will know the difference. The server hesitated. But Mrs. Carter, I'll handle Mrs. Carter. Michael managed a reassuring smile. Just make sure everyone's glass stays full. Across the room, Vanessa held court among a group of society wives, her laughter carrying over the classical quartet she'd insisted on hiring. The funniest thing happened last week, she was saying, one hand perpetually touching the diamond necklace. Michael actually suggested we go to this little hole-in-the-wall restaurant for our anniversary. Can you imagine? 20 years of marriage, and he still doesn't understand the importance of being seen in the right places. The women tittered appropriately, their own jewelry glinting like armor in the chandelier light. Patricia Wellington caught his eye and smiled sympathetically, her recent divorce settlement still making headlines in the society pages. Dad. Emily appeared at his elbow, her voice low. Watch Mom carefully. He focused on his wife as she moved through the crowd with practiced precision. She'd stop at each group, Draw attention to the necklace through some carefully choreographed gesture. Then drop a subtle comment about Michael's latest charming mistake or adorable social faux pas. By the time she finished, everyone would know two things: that Michael had bought her an obscenely expensive necklace, and that she considered him somehow lacking despite his generosity. "Mrs. Carter?" Maria approached cautiously, holding a silver tray. "The seafood canapes you requested." Finally, Vanessa snatched one up, then immediately grimaced. "These are room temperature. I specifically said they needed to be chilled. Are you trying to give our guests food poisoning?" "They just came from the kitchen, ma'am," the chef assured me. "The chef?" Vanessa's voice rose, drawing attention. "The one who probably learned to cook at some strip mall culinary school?" Michael started forward, but Emily caught his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Something's not right." He watched as Vanessa berated Maria, noting how his wife's left hand kept touching the diamond necklace, not in the preening way she'd done all evening, but almost checking it was still there. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vanessa's voice suddenly cut through the party's buzz. The quartet fell silent. All eyes turned to her as she stood in the center of the room, one hand clutched dramatically at her throat. "My necklace! It's gone!" The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Vanessa spun in a slow circle, her eyes wide with perfectly performed distress. "Someone has stolen my diamonds. My beautiful necklace." Michael watched her performance with new eyes, noting the precise way she modulated her voice, the calculated tremor in her hands. This was Vanessa at her finest. The wronged woman, the victim, the star of her own tragedy. "It must have been while I was talking to the staff," she continued, her gaze settling on Maria with predatory focus. "You were hovering around me all evening, weren't you?" Maria's face drained of color. "Mrs. Carter, no. I would never." "Search her." Vanessa's voice cracked like a whip. "Search all of them. $100,000 in diamonds doesn't just vanish." The room descended into chaos. Guests backed away from the staff like they were contagious. Maria began to cry. 20 years of spotless service meaning nothing in the face of Vanessa's accusation. Other servants stood frozen, humiliation burning on their faces. "Vanessa," Michael's voice cut through the noise. "That's enough." She rounded on him, teeth bared in a snarl that transformed her beautiful face into something ugly. "Enough? Our staff are thieves, and you're defending them? This is exactly why people walk all over you, Michael. You're weak. Pathetic. No wonder your last promotion went to Robertson instead of you." The party dissolved rapidly after that. Guests couldn't leave fast enough, their expensive cars peeling out of the circular driveway like they were fleeing a natural disaster. In a way, they were Hurricane Vanessa had always left destruction in her wake. The next evening, they sat around the formal dining table, the tension thick enough to cut with the expensive sterling silver knives Vanessa had insisted on buying last Christmas. Michael watched his wife push food around her plate, her movements sharp with barely contained anger. "We need to discuss the necklace," Vanessa announced, setting down her fork with precise control. "I want a replacement, something bigger, more expensive, to show everyone that we won't be cowed by thieves." Michael set his own utensils down slowly. "No." The word hung in the air between them, small but powerful. Vanessa blinked, as if she'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "I said no." He met her gaze steadily. "I'm not buying you another necklace." Vanessa's face contorted with rage. "You pathetic excuse for a man. You're supposed to protect me, provide for me. Instead, you sit here while criminals walk away with my jewelry." "Our staff aren't criminals, Vanessa. They're loyal employees who deserve better than your baseless accusations." "Baseless?" She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You're defending them? Over your own wife? God, you're even weaker than I thought. No wonder everyone at your firm thinks you're a joke." Emily, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Dad, I know what happened to Mom's necklace." Vanessa froze, her perfectly painted lips parting in surprise. The color drained from her face as she stared at her daughter, seeing something in Emily's expression that made her perfect mask slip for just a moment, and in that silence, the first crack appeared in their perfect lie. Hours before the party began, while Vanessa terrorized the catering staff in the kitchen. Emily Carter stood in the mansion's east wing, watching the sunset paint the marble floors in shades of blood and gold. The 17-year-old's reflection fragmented across the wall of mirrors her mother had installed last spring, another unnecessary renovation that had cost more than a year's college tuition. Emily counted her duplicates, each one wearing the same midnight blue dress, each one carrying the weight of quiet observation. Miss Emily? Thomas, their elderly gardener, appeared at the end of the hallway. His weathered face carried new worry lines. Your mother? She's asking about the rose arrangements again. Emily's heart sank. Thomas had worked for them for 12 years, tending their gardens with the devotion of an artist. Vanessa had reduced him to tears last week over the shade of pink in the tea roses. I'll handle it, Thomas. Why don't you check the courtyard lighting? Dad mentioned it earlier. The old man's relief was palpable as he retreated. Emily straightened her shoulders and headed toward the commotion in the main hall. Her mother's voice carried through the mansion like a storm warning. Absolutely useless. The roses should complement my dress, not clash with it. Vanessa stood amid a sea of scattered petals, gesturing at a magnificent arrangement of coral and blush roses. Are you colorblind or just stupid? The florist, Mrs. Chun, clutched her order book with trembling hands. Mrs. Carter, you specifically requested these shades in your email. I have it right here. Are you calling me a liar? Vanessa's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. In my own home, Emily moved forward, positioning herself between her mother and Mrs. Chun. Mom, the roses are perfect. They'll photograph beautifully with the sunset lighting. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, but Emily held her ground. She'd learned long ago that her mother's fury, like a summer storm, would eventually pass if you weathered it correctly. After a tense moment, Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. Fine, but if they ruin my photos, someone's getting fired. Throughout the evening, Emily watched her mother's performance with growing unease. Something was different tonight. Vanessa's usual sharp edges seemed sharper, her carefully constructed mask slipping at odd moments. She touched the diamond necklace constantly, not with her usual preening pride, but with an almost nervous energy. Michael moved through the pre-party chaos like a ship navigating treacherous waters, smoothing ruffled feelings and quietly fixing his wife's destruction. Emily saw how the staff gravitated toward him, seeking shelter from Vanessa's storms. He was their shield, their protector, but Emily wondered who protected him. The sound of breaking glass shattered her thoughts. She hurried toward the kitchen, where she found her mother berating a young server who had dropped a champagne flute. Incompetent fool! Vanessa's face was flushed with rage. Do you have any idea how much these cost? Each glass is worth more than you make in a week. The server, barely out of his teens, looked close to tears. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Carter. I'll pay for it? With what money? Your community college savings? Vanessa laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. Get out of my sight. You're fired. He's not fired. Michael's voice came from the doorway. He stood there in his evening suit, looking every inch the successful businessman. But Emily saw the exhaustion in his eyes. Accidents happen, son. Clean it up carefully and help Robert with the wine service. The server practically ran from the room. Vanessa turned on her husband, her hand flying to the diamond necklace at her throat. Why do you always undermine me? This is why the staff doesn't respect me. They don't respect you because you don't respect them, Emily said quietly. Vanessa's head snapped toward her daughter. For a moment, something dark and unfamiliar flashed across her face. What did you say to me? Emily, Michael warned, but she continued, they're people, Mom, not props in your personal drama. Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume expensive enough to feed a family for a month, suffocating in its intensity. You ungrateful little... She stopped herself, a practiced smile replacing her snarl. Darling, you're too young to understand how these things work. The help needs a firm hand, or they'll walk all over you. Emily watched her mother sweep from the room, noting how her hand never left the necklace. She'd been watching more carefully lately, seeing patterns in her mother's behavior that others missed. The way Vanessa checked her phone when she thought no one was looking. The mysterious appointments that appeared and disappeared from her calendar. The way she'd been touching that necklace all week, like someone savoring their last bite of a favorite meal. Emily? Her father's voice pulled her back to the present. What's going on? What aren't you telling me? She met his concerned gaze, seeing the good man who'd protected her all her life. The man who deserved to know the truth. But not yet. Not here. Later, Dad. After the party, we need to talk. As the first guests began to arrive, Emily took her position near the grand staircase. She watched her mother work the room, each gesture calculated, each laugh precisely pitched. The diamond necklace gleamed at her throat like a collar of ice. Catching and throwing back the light from the crystal chandeliers, Emily knew her mother's tells by now, the slight tightening around her eyes when she was truly angry, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she was lying. Tonight, those tells were everywhere, like cracks in a porcelain mask. Something was coming. Something big. She caught her father's eye across the room. He stood tall and dignified in his tuxedo, playing his part in this elaborate charade. Emily's heart ached for him. Soon, she would tell him everything she knew. Soon, she would help him see the truth behind her mother's perfect lies, but first, they had to survive this party. And somehow, Emily knew this would be a night none of them would ever forget. The dining room fell into a silence so complete that Michael could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting down the seconds until his world changed forever. Vanessa stood frozen, her face a mask of carefully controlled panic as she stared at their daughter. What did you just say? Vanessa's voice had lost its usual sharp edge, replaced by something almost fragile. Emily met her mother's gaze steadily. I said I know what happened to your necklace. The one you claimed was stolen. Emily, Michael leaned forward, studying his daughter's face. What are you talking about? Yes, Emily. Vanessa's composure returned, her voice dripping with condescension. Please enlighten us with your little detective story. Emily pulled out her phone, her movements deliberate. Last Tuesday, at 2:15 p.m., you visited Golden Crown Pawn Shop on 5th Street. You were wearing your green Chanel suit, the one you bought last month. You spent exactly 27 minutes inside. The color drained from Vanessa's face. You followed me? I didn't have to. Emily's voice remained calm. I was going to the bookstore when I saw you coming out. You were smiling, Mother. The same smile you had when you told Dad you lost the tennis bracelet last year. Remember that? The insurance paid out $30,000. Michael's head snapped toward his wife. What? Don't be ridiculous, Vanessa laughed, but the sound was hollow. I would never set foot in a pawn shop. Really, Emily, if you're going to make up stories. The owner was very helpful, Emily continued, especially when I mentioned the security cameras. Vanessa's hand flew to her throat where the necklace had been. You're lying. Emily pulled up a video on her phone and set it on the table. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Vanessa Carter in her designer suit, sliding a velvet box across a counter, accepting an envelope in return. You little spy. Vanessa lunged for the phone, but Emily was faster. How dare you? Following me, investigating me like some common criminal. You mean like how you accused our staff? Emily's voice finally showed emotion anger. Like how you humiliated Maria, who's worked for us for 20 years. Called her a thief in front of everyone. Michael stood slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Vanessa, look at me. She turned to him, switching tactics instantly. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for his hand. Michael, darling, this is all a misunderstanding. I can explain. He pulled his hand away. Then explain? Right now. Vanessa faltered, then rallied. I needed some quick cash for a charity event. I was going to buy it back next week. I didn't want to bother you with the details. The charity event for Derek Wells? Emily asked quietly. The name hit Vanessa like a physical blow. She stumbled back, catching herself on the edge of the dining table. Oh! Emily pulled up another screen on her phone. Derek Wells, 32 years old. Former investment banker, current con man. He's got quite a record. 3 arrests for fraud, 2 for embezzlement. All charges dropped when the victims mysteriously decided not to press charges. She looked up at her mother. Usually wealthy women. Usually married. Stop it. Vanessa's voice shook. Just stop it. I have a text, Mom. Emily's voice was almost gentle now. All of them. The plans to leave Dad, the promises Derek made. How you've been stealing and pawning jewelry for months to fund your new life together. Michael stood absolutely still, his face carved from stone. How long? Michael, please, Vanessa started. How long? 6 months, Emily answered when her mother remained silent. Since the Wellington Charity Gala. That's where they met. While you were helping Richard with his son's college applications. Mom was in the conservatory with Derek planning how to bleed you dry. Vanessa suddenly straightened, her face hardening. Fine. Yes. I've been seeing Derek. And you know what? He makes me feel alive. He appreciates me, desires me. When was the last time you looked at me that way, Michael? When was the last time you were anything but a boring, predictable ATM? Michael didn't flinch. Where's the money, Vanessa? She laughed high and brittle. Safe. With Derek. We're leaving together, starting fresh. Away from this suffocating life. This endless parade of business dinners and charity events. Away from you. No, Mom. Emily's voice was sad now. Derek left town 3 days ago. Right after you gave him the money from the necklace. You're lying. But there was fear in Vanessa's eyes now. Real fear. She grabbed her phone, fingers shaking as she pulled up her messages. He's just busy. He'll call me back. He promised. He's gone, Emily said. The number you've been texting was disconnected yesterday. His apartment is empty. The offshore account you've been transferring money to? Cleaned out. Vanessa's phone clattered to the marble floor. No, he wouldn't. He loves me. He said, how much? Michael's voice was terrifyingly calm. How much did you give him? Emily answered again. The necklace was worth $100,000. The tennis bracelet was $30,000. The sapphire earrings from Grandma Carter, $45,000. The Cartier watch from your anniversary, $60,000. Plus cash withdrawals totaling about $200,000 over the past 6 months. Michael did the math in his head. Nearly $500,000. He said we'd travel, Vanessa whispered, more to herself than them. Paris, Milan, Singapore. He said I deserved better than... She looked up at Michael, really looked at him, and for the first time, there was something like fear in her eyes. Michael, I can explain. We can fix this. No. The word fell between them like a blade. We can't. Don't be dramatic. Vanessa's voice took on its familiar, cutting edge. What are you going to do? Divorce me? Please. Think of the scandal, the embarrassment. Your precious firm wouldn't like that, would they? Their star director, caught up in such a tawdry affair. Michael smiled then, a cold expression that made Vanessa take a step back. You really don't know me at all? Do you? He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Jack? Yes, I know it's late. Remember that contingency plan we discussed? Execute it. All of it. Now. Vanessa's eyes widened. What are you doing? What I should have done years ago. He turned to Emily. Send everything you have to Jack Thompson at Morrison & Reed. All the evidence, all the footage, all the texts. Michael, stop this. Vanessa's voice rose to a shriek. I'm your wife. No. He looked at her with cold disgust. You're a thief, a liar, and as of this moment, you're no longer my concern. You can't do this to me. Vanessa grabbed his arm. I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone about your affairs, your illegal dealings. What affairs? Emily cut in. What illegal dealings? We both know Dad's never been anything but faithful and honest. But you, Mom? I have proof of 6 different affairs in the last 3 years. Want me to name them? Vanessa's face crumpled. Emily, sweetheart, I'm your mother. No. Emily's voice was ice. A mother protects her family. She doesn't destroy it. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the mansion. With each strike, Michael watched his wife's perfect mask crack a little more, revealing the stranger who had been living in his home all these years. And somewhere in the city, a man named Derek Wells was boarding a plane with $500,000 of Michael Carter's money, leaving behind nothing but the wreckage of a carefully constructed lie that Michael's study felt smaller than usual, the leather-bound books and dark wood paneling closing in as he made call after call. Each conversation was brief, precise, like surgical strikes dismantling the life Vanessa had taken for granted. Yes, freeze all joint accounts, he instructed his banker. Every single one. No, she's to have no access. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. Do it now. Vanessa paced the room like a caged tiger, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. You're being ridiculous, Michael. Stop this now, and maybe we can salvage something from this mess. He ignored her, dialing another number. Tom? Sorry to wake you. I need those papers we prepared. Yes, all of them. Have them on my desk by 9 a.m. Papers? Vanessa stopped pacing. What papers? Emily sat quietly in the corner armchair, her phone in her lap like a loaded weapon. She hadn't deleted a single message, a single piece of evidence. Now she watched her mother's perfect world crumble with the detached interest of someone who'd seen it coming for years. Michael. Vanessa slammed her hands on his desk. Answer me. He looked up at her, his eyes cold. Divorce papers, Vanessa. And before you start calculating your alimony, you should know that Jack Thompson has been building this case for months. What? Her voice quavered. You knew? Not everything, he admitted. Not about Derek Wells or the pawned jewelry. But I knew something was wrong. The mysterious appointments, the missing money, the way you'd check your phone and smile when you thought I wasn't looking. So you had me followed? Vanessa's voice rose with indignation. Spied on? How dare you? Michael's laugh was without humor. I didn't need to. You did that all yourself, leaving breadcrumbs for anyone paying attention. The receipts you forgot to hide, the bank statements you didn't think I'd check. Our daughter wasn't the only one watching, Vanessa. Dad hired Morrison and Reed 6 months ago, Emily added quietly. Right around the time you started seeing Derek. Vanessa spun toward her daughter. You little snake. All this time, plotting against your own mother. Don't. Michael's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare attack her. Emily did what you never could. She protected this family. Protected? Vanessa laughed hysterically. By destroying it? By helping you ruin me? You ruined yourself, Emily said. Every lie, every betrayal, every cruel word, those were your choices, Mom. Vanessa's face contorted. I gave you everything. The best schools, the best clothes, every advantage. You gave me nothing, Emily cut in. Dad did all that. You just took credit and complained it wasn't enough. Michael picked up his phone again, but Vanessa snatched it away. Stop making calls. Stop destroying my life. Your life. He stood slowly. What about Maria's life? 20 years of loyalty, and you accused her of theft to cover your lies. What about the other staff you've humiliated? The people you've stepped on? What about our daughter? Watching her mother choose a con man over her family. Derek loves me, Vanessa protested, but her voice held a note of desperation. Emily pulled up something on her phone. Here's Derek 2 days ago at Plaza Hotel. She turned the screen toward her mother. The image showed Derek Wells in the hotel bar, his arm around a blonde woman who was definitely not Vanessa. And here's his real name, Daniel Webster. He's pulled this same con in 3 other cities. Find wealthy, unhappy wives. Promise them love and adventure. Take their money and disappear. Vanessa staggered back, her legs hitting the leather sofa. No, you're lying. He said. He promised. He's gone, Vanessa, Michael said quietly. Along with every dollar you gave him. The necklace? Probably already broken down and sold. The money? In an offshore account you'll never trace. Then help me find him. Vanessa surged forward, grabbing Michael's shirt. You have connections, resources. We can get the money back. We can fix this. He removed her hands firmly. There's nothing to fix. Tomorrow morning, you'll be served with divorce papers. The prenup you insisted on? It has an infidelity clause. You get nothing. Nothing. Her voice rose to a shriek. You can't do that. Half of everything is mine. Not anymore. He turned back to his desk. You've got until morning to pack your things. After that, the locks will be changed. I'll fight you. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I'll tell everyone about your affairs, your crooked business deals. What affairs? Emily stood, her phone ready. What crooked deals? I have proof of your affairs, Mom. 6 of them in 3 years. But Dad? The worst thing in his emails is how many times he's covered for you. Paid off people you've hurt. Cleaned up your messes. Vanessa turned on her daughter, hand raised to strike. Michael caught her wrist in midair. Don't. Let go of me. She struggled in his grip. If you ever try to hurt our daughter again, his voice was deadly quiet. There won't be a corner of this earth where you can hide from me. Understand? He released her, and Vanessa stumbled back, rubbing her wrist. For the first time, real fear showed in her eyes. She looked around the study wildly, like a trapped animal seeking escape. Think about what you're doing. She tried one last time, her voice honey-sweet. 20 years of marriage, Michael. All the memories, all we've built together. Are you really going to throw that away? Let me make it up to you. We can start fresh, go to counseling. There's nothing left to save. He cut her off. The woman I married never existed. She was just another one of your lies. Emily? Vanessa turned to her daughter, tears flowing freely now. Sweetheart, please. I'm your mother. Help me make him understand. Emily stood, walking to her father's side. I am helping, Mom. I'm helping Dad see the truth. Finally, the grandfather clock struck 3 in the morning, its chimes echoing through the silent house. Each strike seemed to mark another nail in the coffin of Vanessa's carefully constructed world. She looked between them, husband and daughter, united against her, and something in her broke. The sophisticated mask cracked completely, revealing the desperate, furious woman beneath. You'll regret this, she hissed. Both of you. When I'm done telling my side of the story, your precious reputation will be in shreds. How do you think your board of directors will react? Your clients? Your country club friends? Michael smiled, and there was steel in it. Tell them whatever you want. Emily has proof of everything. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Release one story to the press, and we'll release all of it. Would you like to see your text messages to Derek splashed across the society pages? Or should we start with the security footage from the pawn shop? Vanessa's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She stood there, designer dress wrinkled, makeup streaked, looking nothing like the polished socialite who had terrorized their staff just hours ago. The perfect lie had finally shattered, and in its wreckage stood a stranger wearing his wife's face. Dawn crept through the study windows, painting the room in shades of gray. Michael stood at the window, watching the sky lighten over their manicured gardens. Behind him, Vanessa had collapsed onto the leather sofa, her perfect posture finally broken. Your phone's been quiet, Emily observed, still seated in her corner. Have you tried calling Derek again? Vanessa's hand twitched toward her phone, then stopped. He'll call. He has to. Like he called Amanda Peterson? Emily's voice was gentle, almost pitying. Or Regina Blackwood. Or any of the other women he's conned. Michael turned from the window. Show her. Emily pulled up another file on her phone and handed it to her father. He placed it on the desk in front of Vanessa. Look, the screen showed a news article from 8 months ago. Socialite scammed. Black Widow con man strikes again. Below it was a photo of Derek or Daniel, or whatever his real name was, with another wealthy woman. No. Vanessa shook her head. That's not. It's someone who looks like him. 6 months ago, he was in Boston, Emily continued. Before that, Chicago. Always the same pattern. Find an unhappy wife. Promise her everything she thinks she's missing. Convince her to liquidate assets slowly so the husband doesn't notice. Then, when he has enough, she made a vanishing gesture with her hand. He loved me, Vanessa whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. That Michael's phone buzzed. He checked the message, then nodded to himself. Jack's team has the paperwork ready. They'll be here at 9. Your lawyers can't touch me, Vanessa said, but her voice trembled. I know my rights. Half of everything is mine. Actually, Emily pulled up another document. According to the prenup you insisted on, in cases of infidelity proven with evidence, the unfaithful party forfeits all claims to marital assets. Vanessa's head snapped up. That clause was meant to protect me. In case he ever cheated, Michael finished. Like you've been doing for years? The prenup doesn't specify which party has to be unfaithful. Your lawyer should have read it more carefully. My lawyer? Vanessa's eyes widened. Harold drafted that agreement. He wouldn't. Harold retired last year, Michael said quietly. Jack Thompson took over all his files, including yours. The implications hit Vanessa like a physical blow. You planned this. All of it? No, Michael corrected. I prepared for it. There's a difference. I didn't make you cheat, Vanessa. I didn't make you steal, or lie, or treat people like dirt beneath your shoes. Those were your choices. What about my choices now? She stood, smoothing her wrinkled dress with shaking hands. What if I go to the press? Tell them how you and our daughter conspired against me. Spied on me. Mom. Emily's voice cut through her threats. Stop. Look. She turned her phone screen again, showing a series of text messages. Vanessa's own words glowed on the screen. I hate him. So boring, so pathetic. Once you get the money transferred, we'll never have to see him again. The staff suspect nothing. That idiot Maria actually apologized for losing the tennis bracelet. These people are so stupid. Got another $50K from the joint account. Michael never checks the statements. Too trusting for his own good, Vanessa's face went ash gray. Those are private. Not anymore. Michael's voice was steel. You want a media war? Go ahead. Emily has everything documented. Every theft, every lie, every cruel word. How do you think the society pages will react to the real Vanessa Carter? You wouldn't dare, but her voice quavered. The scandal would hurt you too. I don't care. He met her gaze steadily. Some things are worth more than reputation. Like truth. Like justice. A sharp knock at the study door made them all turn. Robert, their butler, entered with an envelope. Mr. Carter, this was just delivered by courier. Michael took the envelope, noting the Plaza Hotel logo in the corner. He opened it and removed several photographs. Studying them before passing them to Vanessa, she took them with trembling hands. The first showed Derek Daniel in the hotel bar 2 nights ago. The second showed him at the airport yesterday, boarding a plane. The third showed him in another hotel bar, this time in Singapore, taken just hours ago. He wasn't alone. The blonde's name is Jessica, Emily supplied. She's an heiress from Texas. They met last week, right after he got your money. Apparently, she has access to a much larger trust fund. Vanessa's legs gave out, and she sank back onto the sofa. All this time you were watching, both of you, building a case, gathering evidence. We tried to warn you, Emily said softly. All those times I asked about your appointments, all those times Dad suggested counseling. You didn't want to listen. The car will be here in an hour, Michael announced, checking his watch. Pack whatever you can carry. Everything else will be shipped to whatever address you provide your lawyers. You're throwing me out. Vanessa's voice rose hysterically. Like some common, like a thief. He cut her off. Like someone who stole my money, betrayed my trust, and tried to destroy our family. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. She turned to Emily, one last desperate attempt. Sweetheart, please. Whatever I've done, I'm still your mother. You can't let him do this. Emily stood, moving to her father's side. You stopped being my mother the moment you chose your lies over your family. The moment you decided your greed was worth more than our trust. Vanessa looked between them, husband and daughter, united against her, and something final broke in her expression. The sophisticated mask cracked completely, revealing the hollow thing beneath. Fine, she spat, standing suddenly. Keep your precious house, your perfect life. I don't need any of it. Or you? She stormed toward the door, then stopped, turning back with a venomous smile. You know what's funny, Michael? All these years, I thought you were the weak one. Too nice, too trusting, too pathetic to see what was happening under your nose. But you were playing the long game, weren't you? Watching, waiting, building your case piece by piece. The difference between us, Michael said quietly, is that I wasn't playing any game. I was protecting my family. Something you never understood. The sun had fully risen now, streaming through the study windows and illuminating the room in harsh morning light. It showed every crack in Vanessa's makeup, every wrinkle in her designer dress, every tear track on her cheeks. She looked around the study one last time, at the life she'd thrown away, at the husband and daughter she'd lost. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed through the house, growing fainter and fainter until finally there was only silence. The morning sun cast long shadows through Michael's office at Morton and Associates, where he sat reviewing the final divorce papers with Jack Thompson. 3 days had passed since Vanessa's departure, but her presence still lingered like a ghost in every corner of their lives. "She's not going quietly," Jack said, sliding another document across the mahogany desk. "Her new lawyer filed this morning. She's contesting everything." Michael picked up the paper, scanning its contents. "Let me guess. She claims I forced her into the prenup, among other things." Jack leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "She's alleging emotional abuse, financial control, and my personal favorite, that you and Emily conspired to frame her for theft." A sharp knock interrupted them. Michael's assistant poked her head in, her face worried. "Mr. Carter?" "She's here. With reporters." Right on cue, Vanessa's voice carried down the hallway, loud and theatrical. "My own husband, spying on me, manipulating me, turning my daughter against me. The public needs to know the truth." Michael stood, straining his tie. "Time to end this." He opened his office door to find Vanessa holding court in the middle of the reception area, surrounded by 3 journalists with notepads and cameras. She transformed herself back into the perfect victim. Designer suit immaculate, makeup flawless, eyes bright with artfully restrained tears. "Michael," she exclaimed, playing to her audience, "finally ready to tell the truth? About how you orchestrated this whole thing to destroy me?" "Mrs. Carter," one of the reporters stepped forward. "You were saying your husband falsified evidence of your affairs." "Oh, the affairs are real enough." Michael's voice cut through the chaos. Every head turned toward him. "Would you like to see the proof? The text messages? The hotel receipts? The security footage?" Vanessa's performance faltered for a moment. "You wouldn't dare." "Dad." Emily's voice came from behind them. She stood in the doorway, tablet in hand. "I have everything ready. Should I send the files to the press now?" The reporter's attention shifted instantly, sensing a bigger story. Vanessa took a step toward their daughter, her voice honey-sweet. "Emily, darling, think about what you're doing. I'm your mother. You lost the right to call me that." Emily cut her off the moment you chose a con man over your family. "Con man?" One of the reporters perked up. "Mrs. Carter, what about the allegations that your boyfriend, Derek Wells, is actually Daniel Webster, a known fraudster?" The color drained from Vanessa's face. That's a lie. Derek loves me. He's just away on business." "In Singapore." Emily tapped her tablet. "With Jessica Whitmore, the oil heiress?" She turned the screen toward the reporters, showing the most recent photos of Derek and his new target. "Or should we talk about Regina Blackwood in Chicago? Amanda Peterson in Boston? All the other women he's scammed?" The reporters began scribbling frantically. This was no longer the story of a wronged society wife. This was something much juicier. "Mrs. Carter, is it true you pawned jewelry to fund Mr. Wells's escape? Did you knowingly falsify theft reports for insurance money? Have you been in contact with Mr. Wells since he left the country?" Vanessa backed away, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling. "This is all a misunderstanding. If you just let me explain." "Explain what?" Michael's voice was quiet, but carried across the room. "How you stole $500,000. How you accused our loyal staff of theft to cover your tracks. How you planned to abandon your family for a con man." "I didn't." Vanessa started, but Michael wasn't finished. "The woman standing before you," he addressed the reporters directly, "spent years cultivating an image of perfection. But behind that image, she stole, lied, and betrayed everyone who trusted her. And now that she's been caught, she's trying one last con, playing the victim." "You bastard," Vanessa hissed, her mask finally cracking. "You think you've won? I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone about your affairs, your shady business deals." "What affairs?" Emily stepped forward, her tablet ready. "What shady deals?" "Mom, we have every email, every text, every bank statement. The only person with anything to hide is you." One of the reporters raised his hand. "Miss Carter, would you be willing to share those records?" "Don't you dare." Vanessa lunged for the tablet, but Michael caught her arm. "Touch our daughter again," he said softly, "for her ears only, and I'll add assault to the criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" The reporters jumped on the word like sharks, scenting blood. Jack Thompson stepped forward, legal documents in hand. "My firm has already filed complaints with the police regarding Mrs. Carter's insurance fraud, theft, and misappropriation of assets. We have documentation of every false claim, every pawned piece of jewelry, every dollar transferred to Derek Wells's accounts. This is harassment. Vanessa's voice rose to a shriek. I'm the victim here. They're all conspiring against me. No, Mom. Emily's voice was sad but firm. The only person who conspired against this family was you. The reporters were practically salivating now, their story growing better by the minute. Michael watched as Vanessa looked frantically between them, realizing she'd lost control of her own narrative. Get out. Michael's voice was steel. Get out of my office. Get out of our lives. You've done enough damage. This isn't over, Vanessa snarled, backing toward the elevator. You'll regret this, all of you. But her threats sounded hollow now, like the dying gasps of a drowning woman. The reporters didn't even follow her, too busy asking Emily for copies of the evidence and Jack for details about the criminal complaints. As the elevator doors closed on Vanessa's furious face, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The perfect lie was finally, completely shattered, and in its wreckage, the truth stood gleaming like a diamond, hard, bright, and unbreakable. Evening shadows crept across the mansion's back garden, where Michael sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. The sound of footsteps on the flagstone path made him look up to find Maria approaching with a silver tray. Your evening coffee, Mr. Carter, she said, setting the tray on the garden table. And Miss Emily asked me to remind you about dinner. Michael smiled at his housekeeper. Maria, wait. Please sit for a moment. She hesitated, then took the offered seat. Sir, I want to apologize again, he began, for what happened at the party. What Vanessa did to you, Mr. Carter, Maria interrupted gently. You have nothing to apologize for. We all knew who Mrs. Carter really was. We stayed because of you and Miss Emily. The garden door opened, and Emily emerged carrying a folder. Dad, you need to see this. The police just sent it over. She handed him a document as Maria excused herself. Michael scanned the pages, his expression hardening. They found it in Singapore. Emily sat across from him. Local police picked him up this morning. Apparently, Jessica Whitmore wasn't as naive as his usual targets. She got suspicious and hired a private investigator. Michael set the papers down. How much did he take from her? Nothing. Emily's smile held a touch of satisfaction. She was working with the authorities the whole time. They've been tracking him since Chicago. Mom was his last successful con. Have you told her? Emily shook her head. Haven't heard from her since the scene at your office. But her lawyer's been busy. She pulled out her phone. The society pages are having a field day. Look, the headline glowed on the screen. Carter family scandal. Socialite wife caught in international con man's web. Below was a photo of Vanessa from Happier Days, juxtaposed with Derek Wells's mugshot. She's getting what she wanted, Emily observed. Everyone's talking about her. Just not the way she planned. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. The board meeting's tomorrow. They'll want to discuss the publicity. Are you worried? No. He met his daughter's concerned gaze. The truth is our shield, Emily. We have nothing to hide. The garden door opened again, and Robert appeared. Sir, there's a call from the police station. They say it's urgent. Michael took the call in his study, Emily hovering nearby. Detective Phillips's voice crackled through the speaker. Mr. Carter, we've got a situation. Your ex-wife, attempted to access your house 20 minutes ago. When security stopped her, she became agitated. What do you mean? Agitated? She tried to break in through the garden entrance. When that failed, she started throwing rocks at windows. We've got her in custody, but she's demanding to speak with you. Michael's jaw tightened. Is she drunk? Among other things, the detective said diplomatically. Look, normally we'd process her for attempted breaking and entering, but given her state, might be better to handle this quietly. Emily touched her father's arm. Dad, let me go. I want to see her. Absolutely not. She's spiraling, Emily insisted. The Derek Wells arrest is all over the news. She must have seen it. Please, Dad. I need to do this. Michael studied his daughter's face, seeing not the child he'd protected all these years, but the strong young woman she'd become. Detective, we'll be there in 20 minutes. The police station hummed with late-night activity. An officer led them to an interview room where Vanessa sat, her designer outfit wrinkled, her makeup smeared. She looked up as they entered, her eyes red-rimmed. "Come to gloat." Her voice was slurred. "The perfect father-daughter duo. Here to watch me fall?" "We came because you needed help," Emily said quietly. "That's more than you ever did for us." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Help? I don't need help. I need Derek. He loves me. He'll come back." "He's in jail, Mom." Emily placed her phone on the table, showing the arrest report. "Singapore police caught him trying to scam another woman. He never loved you. You were just another mark." "No." Vanessa shook her head violently. "No, you're lying. Like you lied about everything else. Spying on me, plotting against me." "We didn't plot anything." Michael cut in. "You did this to yourself. Every lie, every betrayal, every cruel word, those were your choices." "My choices?" Vanessa surged to her feet. "What choice did I have? Trapped in that mausoleum you call a home, playing the perfect wife to a man who gave you everything." Emily finished. "Money, status, family, and it still wasn't enough. Nothing was ever enough for you." Vanessa sank back in her chair, the fight draining out of her. "You don't understand. Derek promised. He said we'd travel the world. Be free. Be young again. While stealing my money," Michael added coldly. "While abandoning your daughter. Was it worth it, Vanessa? Was his con worth destroying your family?" She looked up at them, mascara tracking down her cheeks. For a moment, something like reality seemed to penetrate her denial. I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." Emily's voice was gentle but firm. "Every step of the way, you knew exactly what you were doing. That's why you kept evidence of Dad's imaginary affairs, so you'd have leverage if you got caught. That's why you accused the staff of theft, so you'd have someone to blame. Everything was calculated, Mom. Everything was a lie." Vanessa stared at her daughter, seeing perhaps for the first time the wisdom and strength that had been there all along. "Emily, I'm sorry." "No." Emily stepped back. "You don't get to apologize now. Not after everything you've done. We came to make sure you were safe. That's all." She turned to the officer waiting by the door. "We won't be pressing charges for the break-in attempt, but the restraining order stands. And if she comes near the house again, we'll prosecute." "Emily, please," Vanessa called as they turned to leave. "I'm still your mother." Emily paused in the doorway, looking back at the broken woman who had given her life but never loved. No, a mother protects her family. She doesn't destroy it for a con man's promises. As they walked out of the police station, Michael draped his arm around Emily's shoulders. "You okay?" She leaned into him, strong despite the tears in her eyes. "Yeah, I think I finally am." Behind them, through the station's windows, they could hear Vanessa's sobs echoing down the empty corridors. But they didn't look back. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt, and sometimes that was for the best. A week later, Michael sat in his study, reviewing the final police report. Derek Wells, or Daniel Webster, as his real identity proved to be, had been charged with multiple counts of fraud across 3 countries. The international investigation had uncovered a trail of broken lives and empty bank accounts stretching back years. Vanessa hadn't been his first victim, but thanks to Emily's evidence, she would be his last. That a soft knock drew his attention to the door. Emily entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. The board meeting went well. Michael accepted the cup with a grateful smile. Better than expected. Full vote of confidence. Turns out honesty makes for good business strategy. And the publicity? Jack's team handled it perfectly. The press is focusing on Derek's arrest and his history of scams. Vanessa's just another victim in their story. Exactly what she never wanted to be. Emily settled into her usual corner chair, tucking her feet under her like she used to do as a child. "Have you heard from her?" Her lawyer called. "She's checking into a private rehabilitation facility in Arizona." He set the report aside. Apparently, the Derek Wells arrest hit her hard. Reality finally broke through. "Do you think she'll try to contact us again?" "Eventually." Michael's voice held no emotion. "But it won't matter. Some betrayals can't be undone." Emily nodded, understanding in her eyes. They sat in comfortable silence as evening shadows lengthened across the study floor. Finally, she spoke again. "I invited Maria and her family for dinner tomorrow. and the rest of the staff. I thought, maybe it's time to make this house feel like a home again. Michael studied his daughter over the rim of his coffee cup. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. She met his gaze. You never gave up on me, Dad. Even when Mom, she trailed off, then started again. All those times she tried to turn me into her version of the perfect daughter. You just let me be myself. Being yourself was always more than enough. Michael set his cup down. Emily, about what happened, all of it. I need you to know something. She waited as he gathered his thoughts. I spent years trying to protect you from the truth about your mother. I thought I was shielding you from pain, but you saw everything anyway. You were stronger than I gave you credit for. Dad, let me finish. He leaned forward, his voice earnest. You didn't just expose Vanessa's lies. You showed me what real loyalty looks like. What real love looks like. I couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become. Emily's eyes glistened. I learned from watching you. How you treated people with respect, even when Mom was cruel to them. How you always chose integrity over appearances. A knock interrupted them. Robert stood in the doorway, his dignified manner softened by a gentle smile. Pardon the intrusion, but Maria asked me to remind you about dinner. She's made your favorite pasta, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Robert. Michael stood, then paused. Actually, would you ask everyone to join us? The whole staff. It's time we had a proper family dinner. Robert's eyes widened slightly, but his smile grew. Of course, sir. Right away. Later that evening, the formal dining room hummed with conversation and laughter. Maria's husband told stories about their grandchildren while Thomas, the gardener, discussed his plans for the spring roses. The young server who'd broken the champagne glass at the party was now animatedly describing his college classes. Michael sat at the head of the table, watching his transformed household. The stifling formality of Vanessa's reign had been replaced by genuine warmth. These people weren't just staff. They were family, bound together by loyalty and respect rather than fear and manipulation. Penny for your thoughts? Emily asked softly from beside him. I was just thinking about that night, he replied. When you first said you knew about the necklace, did you know then how it would all end? She shook her head. I only knew I couldn't watch her hurt you anymore. Or anyone else. Miss Emily, Maria called from across the table. Tell them about your photography project. The one that won first prize. As Emily launched into the story, Michael noticed how everyone leaned in to listen, genuinely interested. There was no artifice here, no social climbing or hidden agendas. Just people who cared about each other, sharing a meal and their lives. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 9, its familiar chimes echoing through the house. But now, instead of marking time in a gilded cage, it seemed to ring in something new. Something real. Later that night, Michael found Emily in the garden, photographing the sunset. She lowered her camera as he approached. The roses are blooming early, she observed, gesturing to the bushes Thomas had so carefully tended. Life finds a way, Michael said, putting an arm around her shoulders. Even after the harshest winter, they stood together, watching the sky paint itself in shades of promise. The mansion behind them was just a house now, no longer a showcase for Vanessa's perfect lies, but a home where truth could flourish. Dad! Emily's voice was thoughtful. Do you ever regret any of it? The marriage? The divorce? Derek Wells? All of it? Michael considered the question carefully. I regret not seeing the truth sooner. I regret every time her cruelty went unchallenged. He looked down at his daughter. But I could never regret the one perfect thing that came from all those imperfect years. Emily smiled, leaning into his embrace. No more words were needed. In the distance, a taxi pulled up to a cheap motel. Vanessa Carter, once the queen of their social circle, now sat alone in a bare room, staring at her phone. On the screen was an article about Derek Wells's arrest, accompanied by pictures of him with other women. Each one a mark, each one a stepping stone to the next con. She had lost her necklace. She had lost her money. She had lost her family, and worst of all, she had lost herself. But in the garden of the home she'd tried to destroy, a father and daughter stood together, stronger for the storm they'd weathered. They had paid the price of betrayal in full, and in return, they'd gained something priceless, the truth. In each other.